Have you ever wondered how a war thousands of miles away can change the lives of people all around the world, including yours? This is the story of a conflict that started with bombs and borders but grew into something much bigger. A story about freedom, courage, and the choices nations make when the world is watching. The origins of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine can be traced back to long-standing historical, political, and territorial tensions. Ukraine was once part of the Soviet Union, and after its collapse in 1991, Ukraine gained independence. However, Russia has always viewed Ukraine as part of its sphere of influence. Over the years, Ukraine moved closer to Western countries, seeking partnerships with the European Union and NATO, which angered Russia. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, a region that was part of Ukraine, following political unrest in Ukraine. This move was widely condemned by the international community and led to fighting in eastern Ukraine, where Russian-backed separatists took control of some areas. The tensions kept building as Ukraine continued to grow closer to the West, and Russia saw this as a threat to its security and influence in the region. In February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, claiming it was necessary to protect Russian-speaking people and to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO. However, many viewed this as an act of aggression aimed at taking control of Ukraine. Cities were bombed, millions of people fled their homes, and fierce battles erupted across the country. The war shocked the world and quickly became the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. The invasion caused widespread destruction, humanitarian crises, and major disruptions to global trade, energy supplies, and food exports. Ukraine defended itself with determination, calling on the international community for support. This conflict not only stems from recent political disagreements, but also from deep-rooted historical rivalries, national identities, and Russia's desire to reassert its power. The war has reshaped global politics and created divisions among nations, drawing in allies and opponents from around the world. With its impact spreading far beyond Ukraine's borders, the United States played a major role in the Ukraine war, emerging as the largest supporter of Ukraine in its fight against the Russian invasion. From the very beginning of the conflict in February 2022, the US strongly condemned Russia's actions and pledged its support to Ukraine. Although American troops were not sent directly to fight on Ukrainian soil, the US began sending significant amounts of military aid. This included advanced missile systems, drones, ammunition, air defense equipment, and armored vehicles. The US also provided Ukraine with cutting-edge technology, including satellite intelligence and surveillance tools, allowing Ukraine to track Russian military movements and improve its battlefield strategies. Along with military support, the US sent billions of dollars in financial aid to help keep Ukraine's economy running, rebuild damaged infrastructure, and provide humanitarian assistance to people displaced by the war. The American government viewed this support not only as aid to Ukraine, but also as an effort to protect democracy and defend the principle that borders cannot be changed by force. American officials stressed that their assistance was necessary to prevent future threats to other countries and to show that aggression would not be tolerated. The US also helped coordinate aid from other Western countries, urging NATO and European allies to contribute more military equipment and financial resources. American leadership played a key role in shaping the global response to the conflict. However, the support for Ukraine became a subject of debate within the US, with some political groups questioning the scale of aid and its long-term consequences. Despite differing opinions, the US continued its strong backing of Ukraine, making it the largest donor throughout the war and positioning itself at the center of the global effort to counter Russia's military aggression and support Ukraine's defense. The United States framed its support for Ukraine as a defense of democracy and a stand against authoritarian aggression. From the first days of the war, American leaders stated clearly that the conflict was not just about territorial disputes, but about fundamental values that shaped the global order. They emphasized that Ukraine was a sovereign nation with the right to choose its own future, including its alliances and political system. The US believed that allowing Russia to invade Ukraine without consequences would encourage other authoritarian regimes to use force against their neighbors. American officials described the war as a test of democracy's strength, warning that if the world remained silent, it would send a dangerous message that power and violence could override laws and international agreements. In speeches and public statements, US leaders spoke about the bravery of the Ukrainian people, defending their freedom and their right to self-determination. They praised Ukraine for resisting oppression and standing firm against a much larger military force. The US government used this narrative to explain its large-scale military and financial support, arguing that it was not just about helping one country, but about protecting the stability of democratic nations worldwide. The United States also highlighted the importance of upholding international laws, including the United Nations Charter, which forbids wars of aggression. This message was aimed not only at domestic audiences, but also at other countries that were uncertain about their positions. Through diplomatic efforts, media campaigns, and global summits, the US sought to rally a broad coalition of democracies to back Ukraine, stressing that defending Ukraine's independence was part of a larger mission to safeguard freedom, human rights, and global peace in the face of rising authoritarian threats from Russia and other regimes that reject democratic values. The United States led a global effort to impose severe economic sanctions on Russia in response to its invasion of Ukraine. These sanctions were designed to punish Russia financially, weaken its economy, and limit its ability to fund the war. The US began by freezing the assets of major Russian banks, cutting them off from the global financial system, including the SWIFT payment network, which is essential for international transactions. This step made it harder for Russian businesses to operate internationally and restricted the flow of money into the country. The sanctions also targeted Russia's central bank, freezing hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign reserves, which were meant to stabilize the Russian currency and economy during crises. As a result, the Russian ruble initially collapsed, causing inflation and financial instability. The US also blocked exports of high-tech products, including semiconductors, computer chips, and aerospace components, limiting Russia's ability to produce advanced weapons, aircraft, and other military equipment. Key Russian industries such as oil and gas, which are central to the country's economy, were targeted with bans and restrictions to reduce Russia's revenue from energy exports. In addition to targeting companies and government institutions, the US imposed sanctions on Russian political leaders, oligarchs, and business elites closely connected to the Kremlin. Their overseas assets, including luxury properties, yachts, and bank accounts, were frozen. These measures were intended to put pressure on influential figures in Russia to oppose the war. The sanctions were also coordinated with European nations, Japan, Canada, and others, to maximize their impact. While Russia sought ways to reduce the effects of these actions, the sanctions created long-term challenges for its economy, isolating it from global markets and making it harder to sustain its military operations against Ukraine. The war between Russia and Ukraine has caused a major global impact, affecting countries far beyond the battlefield. One of the most serious effects has been the disruption of energy supplies. Russia is one of the largest exporters of oil and natural gas, especially to Europe. When the war began, many Western countries, including the United States and members of the European Union, reduced their imports of Russian energy to avoid funding the war. In response, Russia cut off or limited gas supplies to Europe, leading to skyrocketing energy prices and shortages. Many European nations faced fuel crises, with some struggling to heat homes and power industries during winter. The war also caused a sharp rise in food prices around the world. Ukraine is a major exporter of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil, and Russia is also a key supplier of grains and fertilizers. Fighting near Ukrainian ports and the blockade of trade routes in the Black Sea prevented millions of tons of food from being exported. This led to shortages in countries that rely on affordable food imports, especially in Africa and parts of Asia, increasing the risk of famine and hunger in vulnerable regions. The conflict also triggered a refugee crisis, with millions of Ukrainians forced to flee their homes and seek shelter in other countries, mainly in Europe. This placed strain on social services, housing, and healthcare in neighboring countries, creating political tensions and challenges for governments trying to accommodate the sudden influx of people. Additionally, the war caused significant financial instability, leading to stock market volatility and higher costs of living worldwide. Many countries struggled with inflation, and global trade was affected by higher shipping costs and supply chain disruptions, causing long-term challenges for both developing and developed economies around the world. The ongoing struggles in the Ukraine war continue to shape the conflict and the world's response. Despite receiving large amounts of military and financial aid from the United States and its allies, Ukraine faces constant battles on multiple fronts. Russian forces remain heavily entrenched in parts of eastern and southern Ukraine, making it difficult for Ukraine to reclaim occupied territories. The fighting has turned into a war of attrition, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Ukraine's military relies on advanced Western weapons, but it also faces challenges such as ammunition shortages, damaged infrastructure, and exhaustion among troops and civilians alike. The Russian military, while also facing losses and sanctions, continues to push its offensive using drones, missiles, and heavy artillery. The conflict has reached a point where swift victories are unlikely, and instead, both sides are locked in a prolonged and destructive fight. Peace talks have been attempted at various stages of the war, but deep mistrust between Ukraine and Russia, as well as differing goals, have made negotiations difficult. Ukraine insists on the full restoration of its territory, including Crimea, while Russia demands recognition of its control over seized areas. The war has created deep political divisions globally, with some countries fully backing Ukraine and others remaining neutral or even supporting Russia due to their own interests. Inside the United States, debates continue over the long-term costs and risks of sustained support for Ukraine. Some American politicians argue that the US should focus on domestic issues, while others stress the importance of standing firm against authoritarian aggression. As the war drags on, it remains uncertain how or when it will end. The conflict has not only changed the lives of millions of people, but has also reshaped alliances and left a lasting impact on global security and diplomacy. This story of the USA and Ukraine war is not just about weapons, battles, or politics. It is about people, choices, and the struggle between freedom and force. It shows how a war in one part of the world can affect millions of lives everywhere, touching everything, from food and energy to safety and peace. It is a story of bravery and suffering, of nations coming together, and of others remaining divided. Through it all, we see how deeply connected the world has become, and how decisions made by a few can shape the lives of many. This war reminds us that peace is fragile, that freedom often comes at a high cost, and that every act of support, whether large or small, can make a difference. As the story continues, it remains a powerful example of the importance of compassion, courage, and the hope that someday, even the hardest struggles can lead to peace. ****